This is Jim Horn with our continuing black and white photography master series. Today we have with us Stefan Baeurle. He is a self-taught photographer residing in the scenic region of Northern California, passionate about creating images. This hobby not only offers an outlet for his imagination, separate from his professional engineering career, but also serves as a platform to showcase the world's beauty through his unique lens. A lover of the outdoors, he finds joy in merging his photography skills with another favorite pastime, hiking. For him, the importance of nature and the preservation of the planet's inherent beauty are paramount. Okay, as I said in the introduction, Stefan is with us today, and I'm really happy that you people will get a chance to see some great photography. It's beautiful landscape work. Stefan, how are you doing today, young man?
Thank you. I'm fine, and thank you for inviting me to talk with you about some of the images. I'm feeling honored, and I'm not that young, but I feel young
Well, you're probably
most of the
younger
time.
than me. Probably younger.
I don't know.
You're in Northern California, and
Correct.
beautiful part of the United States. Originally from Germany, and as Stefan told me, he came over about 20 some years ago, and he's going to stay for a couple of years. And voila, here he is, and that is absolutely great. So Stefan, you've spent a lot of time, I take it. Northern California is a beautiful place to photograph.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also quite diverse. I Because from where I live in San Jose, it's about an hour. I'm at the Pacific coast, and I love the Pacific coast. But also, a great passion of mine is hiking, and there's so many places of hiking here. Within an hour, I can be in 30 different parks and spend a lot of time. And so, it's a beautiful place. I absolutely agree. And then you drive east, maybe 3 hours. You can even have snow, and it's beautiful. It's maybe one of the reasons why we're still here, because we love it here so much.
Right. Yeah, you've got, I think of some of the great photographers that spent a lot of time in Northern California. And, they've always come away with, beautiful images, and yours are right up there at the top. Before we start, I know the listeners and the viewers always want to know what kind of equipment you're using to take the photographs.
Okay, so I use a camera. It's called the Olympus OMD EM5. It's one of the very first Micro Four Thirds cameras. I got it like 11 years ago. It still does a fine job. So that's what I'm using. And then as a lens, I have a pretty good lens, which is equivalent at 24 to 70, basically f2.8 from Panasonic. That's what I'm mostly using. The camera is quite light, but for the type of seascapes I'm making, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, the very long exposure ones, I have a really sturdy, way over designed tripod because I have to put it down in the ground, and sometimes there are waves. That's basically what I'm using. And then for some images, I just use filters, right, to slow down the exposure time, like ND filters, and that's
Right.
about it, hardware wise.
Yeah, I think the long exposure thing. I think when we get into the photos here in a
Yeah.
moment, we can talk about your technique a little bit because I'm always interested in long exposures, and it can get a little. You have to take a few of them. So at least I have to a few of them sometimes in order to get the right mood or the right feeling that you want to get in the photograph. Fortunately, digital allows us to do that, but. And I'm glad to hear Stefan. So many people get into the equipment thing, And I think when everybody sees these photographs, they're going to say, hey, whether the camera's 1 year old or 11 years old, it takes phenomenal photographs. So,
I absolutely agree.
okay, let's take a look at the first shot. Here we go. Oh, now I mean, the highlights are almost perfect on this.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see detail in the highlights. I can see detail in the shadow. I mean, it's a beautiful. Tell us about this shot a little bit.
So this shot I made in 2021. It's a local state park. It's maybe from here 90 minutes drive, but along a beautiful coast and nice stops where you can have a coffee or something. It's called the Garapata State Park. It's a beautiful coastline. You can walk there and you see scenes like this, but you just cross Highway 1, the famous Highway 1, which eventually gets you down to Big Sur, and you can do hikes, which of course I like too, in redwoods. So this one basically caught my eye because I like those rocks formations and how they lead me through the picture, right? They start on the right and there's one on the left and at the end. So I like that basically. And so when I saw that, I had to put down my tripod. So what then basically I try to uh, expose it the way I like it. It's mostly feeling. I don't follow rules with thirds and things like that. The only thing I try is to get the horizon really straight, and sometimes I have to correct this in post. Then I put in some filters to do what I or to get what I want. It's mostly I use polarizers always. They gave me an extra 2 stops, so it already helps with the long exposure. But it also I can play how much clear I want in the water or not, and then an ND filter, and off I go. And then this one was a 3 minutes exposure, so 180 seconds.
180 seconds. Wow. And
Yes.
so you use on this particular shot, or maybe on some of the other ones coming up, you use an ND filter and a polarizer for the water to get that effect that you're getting. Okay.
Yes, I always use polarizers and always ND filters. Yeah.
Wow. Now here's I hope the viewers or the listeners of the podcast turn into the YouTube video, because let's talk about this shot, Stefan, because this is really great. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is made Morro Bay, which is even maybe that's a 3 hour drive. So I spent there 2 nights, 3 days with my family. But one morning, I usually sneak out and just say, "I'll be back in a few hours. I just have to make a few photos." And that's actually the famous Morro Rock. And a lot of my images are memories. So this one. I said a kind of crazy memory. It was extremely windy and foggy, as you can see. Not foggy, but overcast, and it's
Uh-huh.
very windy. And then again, let me check out. I don't know this by heart, but this is also 150 seconds exposure. But it was too windy to even get it in focus. So basically, what I did is I put down my tripod. I composed it. I wanted to see basically some foreground where then eventually leads me to the Morro Rock. I was really lucky that the cloud opened up. And then basically I pressed the shutter button, and then I had it was very cold. I had a jacket on. I stood around like this and tried to block the tripod and the camera from the wind. I must have looked
Oh.
like a crazy guy for 3 minutes. But then I got this shot right, and yeah, I helped a little bit with the dodging and burning of some of the lights. But I know it's one of my favorite photos of the recent years.
Yeah, and I can understand why. And the thing that I admire most is that you knew what you wanted to shoot, but you had to make some concessions as far as the wind and your jacket and so forth.
Yeah.
A lot of photographers would just walk by and say, "Oh, the conditions aren't right," but you made the conditions right here, and you made the photograph right. It's just absolutely beautiful. Now let's talk about this one. Go ahead.
So this one, let me check. Yeah, I made this in summer 2020. It's a beach which called Martin's Beach. It's just south of Half Moon Bay. It's maybe an hour to drive from here. And this one was a very cold, overcast, and foggy day. This was the fog about was the lift, and of course the sea stack is brilliant with this little opening. And I basically I made a few shots. This one I like the most because I see some of the beach, and of course I darkened it a little bit in post. Again, let me check. So this was also 150 seconds, the same technique more or less, where I put an ND filter on there to play with the glare and darken the water, and then just an ND filter to get a longer exposure time. And then I pressed the shutter button, shutter button, yeah, and off we go, right? Uh,
Now, do you
I
do
just
any
remember, yeah.
do you do any test exposures? I mean, before or I mean, have you got your workflow so dialed in on this that I mean, you look at the shot and say it's a 150 seconds or 160 seconds, or do
Yeah.
you do a couple of test exposures?
No, I don't do a test exposure. What I do is I stand down. I don't put any ND filters, nothing on there. I expose it. I just look at the back screen information from my camera. It shows me. I dial in whatever the ISO and my aperture, whatever I want. Usually it's f16 or something like that. And then it gives me, okay, this is this and this much time. Then I have a little app on my phone. It tells me if I now add a 14 stop ND filter in front of it, it just becomes 3 minutes, and that's all I do. And then
Okay.
I check the first photo quickly afterwards to see the histogram is kind of okay, and that's it. That's what
Okay.
I'm doing. Yeah.
Do you remember what app you might use on your phone? I know
Oh
there
yeah,
are a couple. There's a couple time lapse apps
yeah.
that I've seen.
Let me look this up. This is called exposure calculator.
Exposure. Okay, nothing big on that.
Calculator.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it's that's it. But it's I use this for years. It's basically it gives me all what it does. It also has a timer. So basically, it let's say it's a 3 minute exposure, then it's a timer. And on my camera, I kind of have a setting that when I go into bulb mode, it shows me every 20 or every 30 seconds basically what it is captured in. So slowly you can see it's almost black. After 30 seconds, you can see a little bit, and then after 60 seconds more, and slowly you can see it developing over time. I actually like that quite a bit. So
Oh, that
yeah,
and that must be a feature for that particular camera,
yeah,
huh?
it's quite useful.
And I think one of the we'll go here to
Yeah,
I'm sort of a landscape guy, and I see these, and I sort of takes me back. I think you've really developed your workflow. In other
yeah,
words, and I think that that's essential for work like this. I mean,
yeah.
it probably it really when you get the photo at home, I'm assuming, is that your workflow is pretty easy. You know what to do with it. Which is, before we go into the discussion of this one, what do you use? Lightroom, Photoshop, Raw, or what do you use for your post editing?
Okay, so I shoot in RAW, and then I use a software package called ACDC Ultimate. It's a Canadian company. I used to use Lightroom and Photoshop, but when they changed their business model, I just didn't want to go down this route. So I use ACDC Ultimate, which is very much like Lightroom, right? I can import all my raw photos, catalog it, tag it, all sorts of things. But then they have what they call a develop module, where I develop the raw files, and it's non-destructive editing with sliders. It's very similar, but they also have a module which they call Edit, which is essentially a layered tool where I can have plugins and thousands of layers and masks if I wanted to. I never do. I can even have plugins. So in a way, it's the same, but it's a different software. And the black and white conversion, there's a plugin called from a company Nick, Silver FX Pro, and I just use this, and then I basically always make sure my horizon is straight. I'm a picky on that, and
Yeah.
then I do just some dodging and burning, and sometimes I clone out a few things. What I really don't like is like white spots, bird poop. Sometimes you
Yeah.
get this on the sea stack, so I clone those out. That's about it,
Right.
right? And then and I play with dodging and burning. That's it.
So, like many of the uh, great photographers I've seen on this or have had on this channel, you really don't do a lot of post. I mean, you make sure the shot is right, as close to right as possible when you shoot it, and then obviously you have your workflow and just you get it right. Let's talk about this photograph here. The you caught the hole in the rock, and then you've got the backlit. Was that a sun up or sundown shot or?
This was a sundown shot, basically a
Okay.
sunset shot. This is it's called Natural Bridges State Beach in Santa Cruz. It's 45 minutes from here, and I'm there regularly with my family. It's a beautiful beach, and you can there's some forest around, so they're often. And I have seen this many times, and it's usually quite busy. And you rarely get a shot without people in front of it. But this time, because it was late and not so beautiful, right, where we would spend the day at the beach, I went down there and I saw that. And this is a 6 minutes exposure.
6 minutes. Wow.
Yeah, and on top of that, I my camera has a setting where when I do an exposure, it should be perfectly fine. But because it's a CMOS sensor, I'm an electrical engineer, so bear with me. When you apply some voltage just to take the light in, there's always some additional noise it should not capture. So my camera has a feature that when I can turn this on, I do a 6 minutes exposure, then it closes the shutter under the same conditions, wind, temperature, moisture. It takes another picture, but since the shutter is closed, it should be completely black, but it won't. There will be a few dots, which is the noise the electronic inside produces. So it takes the second picture and basically knows, oh, okay, under those conditions, this pixel up there is red. It shouldn't be. It should be black. It basically takes it out from the original picture. And that basically helps me to reduce the noise significantly with those long exposures. However, a 6 minute shot now becomes a 12-minute shot. So basically, I press the button and then I wait 12 minutes before I can do something else. And I kind of like that because it forces me to slow down. I sit down, I eat an apple, or I wander around and, that could be something over there. But I have
Yeah.
like 10, 12 minutes to myself. I don't even take pictures. So at the end of the day, I can maybe home with 5, 6 pictures at best. But I like that because it helps me to slow me down a lot. And I just don't shoot and pray because that's not possible when it takes 10, 12 minutes for one image.
I did a podcast recently thinking about slowing down and shooting. I was
Yeah.
always a big analog photographer, and actually I was in 4x5 at one time. But and you really have to slow down for that. But more importantly, I've had photographers tell me they've had 200, 250,000 images. And I've got about 20,000, and I think, what am I missing here when
Yeah.
I go out and shoot? I'm glad to hear, this slow down. You come back with 5 or 6 images, and these are beautiful images. I mean, let's talk about this one. Is this the same location?
No, that's a different location, and that's basically I have to look this up. It's called Portuguese Beach. It's Sonoma County, north of San Francisco, maybe 90 minutes drive. And I made this 8 years ago, and that's still my number one personal favorite photo of this type of images because this all started my journey into making the seascapes. I actually in front I have a big print just looking at it basically on the other side of the screen. It's again this is only a 90 minutes exposure, but the light was just really great, and I like all those dark rocks. I darkened them a little bit afterwards, but this was really I like that, and I yeah, what can I say? This
Yeah.
is I could look at this almost every day. Actually, I do it, but that started the journey into this. I was there with a few other photographers, and we all went around, and I came home with this and maybe one other picture. That's about it. But this started it, yeah.
Yeah, for the viewers, this is the beach scene with rocks, but the sky is phenomenal. I
Yeah.
mean, your eyes literally walk through the scene.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way I can describe it. I mean, you start at it's easy to do. You start at the bottom. The composition's phenomenal. Leads you right into a beautifully done sky. That the highlights are perfect. Oh, I'm going to go on to the other few questions I think about on these. Now, the tripod you use, because these are, and I know some people are would be interested in this. Is it what kind of tripod do you use, Stefan?
I don't know the brand. I could look it up. It's just over there if you want me to. It's just big and heavy.
It's a
You
big and
really
heavy
don't know.
tripod, and I think that's good enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a heavy tripod, and
Yes.
obviously, yeah, you really can't afford any movement at all with the camera, can you?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It looks totally over the top for this because it's a micro four third camera with a small
Oh yeah,
20.
right.
Oh, so it looks really over the top, but it is sturdy, right? I can put it down. It rarely moves, and that was my whole purpose. The brand, it's some known brand, but honestly, I don't remember.
Well,
I would
but
have to look it up.
does now the do you do a lot of these? I mean, is most of your work done in slow motion? Not well, slow motion's the wrong word, but I mean, is it mostly most of your work seascapes? Excuse me, that are like this? I mean, and do you primarily work in black and white, or do you work in color, or it just depends on the shot?
So my seascapes are exclusive. There are a few exceptions, but I usually don't share them in black and white and they're long exposure. I just love it because it it it, it allows me to distill what I feel, and you will see that my photos they usually have some titles, and they mean something to me. Those titles in the mood I was in, like this one where the sea stack where it was so foggy, I call it Pacific Crit because it was so cold, and I really need a lot of grit to stay there for hours. Those type of things. And my second passion, I said, or my number one passion is really hiking. So I take a lot of what I call treescapes. I just take photos of trees, and they're not long exposure. And I either have my camera with me or just my trusty phone, which these days you
Right.
can take brilliant pictures of trees. And so I like to isolate trees, and I take trees, and sometimes I walk by them many, many times, and eventually the light is right, and I take a photo of it. But they also usually are black and white. Only sometimes when it's really lush and green and there's fog and light coming, I actually have them in color. But mostly my work is in black and white for the trees and for the Pacific coast.
And I think you said for the black and white conversion, you use Silver Effects Pro. Is that who you
Correct.
use?
Yes.
Okay, super. Well, Stefan, I really appreciate you being on the program. I normally reach out to these people via email, and consequently, some people are a little bit suspicious, but and this is beautiful work, folks. If you're listening to the podcast, come on over to the YouTube channel, and you'll see some great sea landscapes that are knock your socks off, and I bet you're going to want to try some if you're living near any kind of water at all. I certainly am. I've been fooling around with the that long exposure, not slow motion. I'm thinking of video, long exposure, and but I can see that you've got to have a workflow, and you've probably you've got it nailed down, and I think that's important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it develops over time. I totally agree. But to me, it's also just being there. I'm usually by myself. Nobody wants to wait, whatever, 15 minutes. I took some picture and then walk around a little bit. But absolutely, the workflow you get over time, to me, it's just overall the experience, coming home with an image I like. Usually, even when I edit it, I do a first edit maybe the day after, and then what I call it, I let it marinate, right? I let it sit for a few days. I look at it again, and most of the time I still think, oh, over there's a little bit, and then let it make a minor adjustment with another few days, and then look at it. And eventually, I get the two thumbs up, and then I'm done. That's how I work.
And I think you mentioned it earlier when we first started talking. You have to have a very tolerant spouse.
Yes,
right?
and I'm very fortunate. I have one and daughter as well.
Oh, great.
Absolutely, they absolutely actually sometimes even encourage me because they know when I come home and maybe made one or two images like this Morrow Rock, I'm in a
Yeah.
much better mood afterwards, right? And
I
so I'm not under pressure. Oh, this is great. I have to take a picture. Who knows when I will be back? No, and so this I'm very happy to have such a supporting family.
I agree. I always find when I go out to photograph, it's almost a meditative experience because you're just thinking about nothing other than that photograph. And I think that's great. I think that's
Yes.
great. Well, thank you very much, Stefan. And it's been a pleasure to talk with you. And it's been a pleasure to look at your photographs and talk about how you did them. Great work, sir. And hope to have you back on the show some other time and look at some of your other work. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, of course, you're very welcome. And thank you for inviting me. I did never expect that. And when you got the email, I was, wow, okay, I'm quite honored. It was a lot of fun talking to you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you.